You might have noticed there was one thing missing from vital signs, and that's mental status. Mental status is the key to understanding how your patient's doing. Without mental status, we really don't have an idea of how our patient is getting better or getting worse. It is your window into the body's functioning systems. If we could ignore everything else and just look at mental status as an indicator of how our patient's doing, that'd be fine. Now, we're not going to do that. You are going to look at everything collectively. You're going to take vital signs. You're going to do assessments. You're going to make sure you get everything. But paying attention to a patient's mental status is the key to understanding how they're doing. The reason is mental status is an indication of brain function, how well their brain is functioning and controlling every system in their body. Mental status changes very, very quickly. The reason is that because your brain is so important, it gets first dibs on everything. First dibs on oxygen, nutrients. It is very sensitive to minute changes in body chemistry, in pH, in temperature, in glucose levels. So any minor changes that occur in your body are going to be manifested as mental status changes. One of the things that happens, though, is when people get into medicine and they start thinking about mental status changes, is they're looking for big changes. They're looking for the patient who goes from talking to me to just mumbling, who goes from mumbling to unresponsive. Now, that can happen. But if we're watching for those changes, we're going to miss all the changes in between that will allow us to prevent the big changes. When we talk about mental status, I want you to think about the person who says they're not feeling well, who goes from sort of being chatty and getting along to kind of grumbling to being a little more quiet. Now, it could just be that they're having a terrible time. That's fine. I hope that's what we find out. But it could also be that there's an underlying condition. It could be that something's going on. Paying attention to mental status is the best way to monitor your patient. So how do we monitor mental status? Well, like vital signs, there are letters and numbers and scales that we can use. I'm going to put one on the board. I'm going to talk to you about one that you'll learn more about in your readings, and we'll talk more about when we get together. But then I'm going to tell you the practical application, how you can do this really easily. So the first scale I'm going to put up on the board is probably the most common scale that you will see in pre-hospital-based medicine. And that's called the AVPU scale, AVPU. The AVPU scale, as I mentioned, is the most common one. It's also the most basic, and in all honesty, it's really not that good. It's a very generalized scale that doesn't fit into what we're looking for with mental status. But you're going to see it a lot, so I want you to understand it. We're going to work this scale from the bottom up. Let's start with you. U stands for unresponsive. Pretty straightforward. Your patient does not respond to any type of stimuli. You poke them, you yell at them, you squeeze their fingertips, nothing gives you a response. That would be U on the AVPU scale. You would say, my patient is U on the AVPU scale, or unresponsive. P stands for pain, or painfully responsive. What this means is when you walk up to your patient, they're laying there, not responding. They appear as an unresponsive patient. You yell at them, you talk to them, nothing happens. But if you apply a painful stimulus to this patient, you get some sort of response. But if you remove that painful stimulus, they appear unresponsive again. So a patient who only responds to painful stimuli is a P on the AVPU scale. V stands for verbal, or you get a verbal response, response to your stimuli. This one is really hard to understand for most people because it's not what it sounds like. Most people think that if a patient is V on the AVPU scale, that your patient speaks back to you. That's not what this means. What this means is that your patient appears unresponsive. You walk up to them, there's no response. But if I speak to them, if I give them a verbal stimulus, I get some sort of response back. If I'm not actively engaged in speaking to them, they appear unresponsive again. That's what V means. Now we go to the A. The A stands for alert, but it has multiple components. Alert and oriented. Alert and oriented. Alert simply means you're there. I walk up, your eyes are open, you're alert. That's what it means. But I want to know how alert you are. Are you alert and just simply there, but you don't know anything? You're not aware of anything? Or are you alert and you're oriented to certain criteria? And there are 3 criteria that we're looking at. The first one is person, place, and time. A person who is alert and oriented, or what we would call A and O, times 3, is a person who knows who they are, where they are, and what time it is. So I would say, what's your name? Where are we? And do you know what time of day it is? Or even what day it is? That would be a person who we would say is A and O times 3. The next level would be person and place. So this is the person who's alert and oriented, and I say, what's your name? And they tell me. And I say, where are we? And they tell me. And I say, do you know what day it is? And they're unable to give me an answer as it relates to time. Actual time of day, the date, the month, the year, any of those. This person would be A and O times 2. Then we have a person who's A and O times 1, meaning I walk up and they can tell me their name, but they're unclear as to where they are. They're unclear as to the time. They're only able to tell me their name. That's a person who's A and O times 1. We do have one more category. The person who's A and O, alert and oriented, times 0. This again is that person who you walk up to, their eyes are open, they're communicating with you, but they can't answer any of your questions. They don't know their name, they don't know where they are, they don't know what time of day or even the day or the month or the year. So they're alert, but they're oriented to nothing. Now, if you look at this scale, you say, okay, that's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of components to it. But here's the problem with this scale that I want you to understand. Unresponsive is pretty easy. If you're unresponsive, you're unresponsive. But let's take a painfully responsive patient. I could have someone who appears unresponsive, and I come up to them, and I give them a painful stimulus. And I have one patient who just moans back at me. I have another patient that I give a painful stimulus to, and they say, stop, stop, and then they're out again. Or I have another patient that I give a painful stimulus to, and they simply flex or extend their limbs. Now, all of those patients would be P on this scale, but you can see how they're very different patients. And what we have to do is start qualifying that. It becomes a little more complex. It's even more complex in verbal, where I walk up to the patient who appears unresponsive, and I give them a verbal stimulus, and I have one person who just mumbles, one person who groans, one person who uses incomprehensible sounds, and another person who speaks in full sentences. All of them are V, but they're all very different patients. We add in the alert and oriented, and you can see how that could get complex as well. What about the person who knows that it is Monday? The person who knows that it's 1 o'clock on Monday? But the person who only knows that it's 2022? or the person who only knows that it is January. Suddenly, I have all these patients that meet the criteria, but there's a wide range of patients in there. That's why this scale is not that great. So let me give you another scale that you could use. This scale is a little more complex, right? You'll see it in your readings, and we'll talk more, like I said, when we get together. This is called the Glasgow Coma Score. This is a lot more precise. What this score does is it gives you a grade for different things that you do. It gives you a grade for your verbal responsiveness, how well you actually answer my questions. It gives you a grade for your eye response, whether you're opening your eyes spontaneously, whether you're not opening your eyes at all, or if you open them only to pain. And it gives you a grade for your motor response, how well you obey commands, how well you move your limbs, if you just point to pain, or if you're just flexing or extending abnormally. And you get a score for each of these. What we then do is add up that score, and based on the number you get, tells me where you are, how bad or good you're doing. This is a much more precise scale with a lot less ambiguity than the AVPU scale. The trouble is, this scale requires you to remember 15 different types of questions and responses that you have to ask. I would implore you that if you're going to keep going in medicine, this is the scale you need to learn. This is the more precise scale. So, how do we make this more practical? How do we make it so that you can really understand a patient's mental status? Simply pay attention to them. That's what's important. Yeah, it's nice if you can give them a number and even qualify it, write in some descriptors. But what's more important is that you're actually paying attention to your patient. Does your patient start to get a little woozy? Does your patient start asking repetitive questions? Is your patient not remembering things as clearly as they used to? Are they complaining more? Are they getting lethargic? Those are all mental status changes. If you can pay attention to the mental status of your patient on a minute level, on a second-by-second level, by continually interacting with them, you're going to be ahead of the game when it comes to stopping the progression of disease processes and managing your patient moving forward.